absolutely do. The second thing ultimately is about the constantly evolving guidance, risk and policy. Now, nature and biodiversity, by its nature, no pun intended, or sort of intended, is really a messy space. It's really fast moving. So just getting that time to spend some time to understand what's going on is going to be critical. Everyone likes to know really how well they're doing compared to everybody else. And that's a combination of kind of professional pride, but also wanting to build yourself, but also really wanting to know what are others doing. Because when no one really knows what they're doing on a lot of things, it's important to really sort of sense check what you're doing. We are going to be trying to combine effort across sectors. Now, there are many, many initiatives out there, and most of what we will be doing is pointing people towards initiatives and groups and activities that already exist. But one thing we'll be doing in our group is having much more informal, collective conversations where we have shared geographies, commodities, and particularly across industry. So it's really about putting you in touch with your peers, not with consultants, not with solution providers. In fact, we don't typically allow those people into the main meetings. We invite them as guests, and of course, everybody's welcome. This is really those with the nature role, and a few guests are helping out with me as well. So ultimately, we're trying to get to faster, more confident action and more scalable impact, of course. And it's free. So very much thanks to the founding partners, who I'll introduce in a second. All of this is freely available to you. You have to apply to join the P group. We just don't want people who aren't necessarily owning that nature role, but everybody is welcome at all levels of maturity. And I'll share the poll results in a second, which will look very interesting. So if you've just joined and you haven't completed that, please do so. Quick set of principles. What are we here? There is, as I mentioned, no barrier to entry to take part. If you've got that role, it's open and safe. It's about the challenges and yes, solutions, but your experiences of those solutions, not people pitching stuff at you. There is no sponsors of this peer group, and never will be. Consultants and solution providers are welcome, as I mentioned, but only as guests. We will work to define the shared challenges that you've got, the sorts of things you need to solve, and most often or not, we'll find where they already exist rather than duplicate them and create them. We will really stretch and test the argument, just in case anyone thinks we need to create something, to see if it already exists first, and then we will highlight it, showcase it, and really encourage it. So most of what we're doing is compiling, curating things in this space and not duplicating effort. We will learn from what others have learnt on, again, my work on scope 3, overburdening suppliers, proliferation of stuff. We're going to really learn all our lessons. We are not going to make the same mistakes, or try not to make the same mistakes. We're going to involve the supply voice. A critical thing in all my collaborations is we have to talk to each other as a value chain. We are not sitting in ivory towers telling suppliers what to do, and that very much won't be the case here. And if you feel that it is, then let's make sure we get those suppliers involved and get that voice involved. Obviously, equally, we want that on the ground perspective as well. It is a cliche, but it's a reason why it is. We must get that voice, whether it's Indigenous people or whatever it may be. We must make sure those voices are represented in here and challenge ourselves if they're not. And as I had to actually emphasise, we're here to navigate, support, and focus, not duplicate other initiatives. We're here to champion them. What do we actually want to do? I'm committed to running this for the next year with Melissa. So we've got a year's worth of work, definitely. We want to make sure that at any one time, you can get a sense of the key challenges everyone is asking. And we'll be constantly capturing fresh concerns and worries, as well as longer term challenges that you face. And we'll be mapping those and connecting those with people who've been there and done it, or had a good go, or succeeded, or failed. And we're going to be mapping those peers together. So you will learn from your equivalents what they've tried and learnt and failed on in some cases as well. It will be a safe space for that. And ultimately, we're going to go ahead very, very soon, including starting today, to more systematically map those people together. So more on that in a second. As I mentioned, we are absolutely delighted to have Tom Newbigging at GSK and GSK as a whole, and Maeve Hall at Schneider Electric as well, who have stepped up as people who have this role, who are feeling this pain and this challenge, to say, we don't mind making sure that we get this group going so we can learn on a whole. So huge thanks to Tom and Maeve as well. So before I go to Melissa, perhaps Tom, if you're there, hopefully you are, and Maeve, do you want to say a quick hello?
Happy to. Thanks, Ollie. Hi, everybody. Great to see so many people on the call for our first official Nature and Biodiversity Peer Group meeting. So I am the Director for Nature in GSK's procurement sustainability team. So feel very fortunate that that is an actual job. I'm sure a lot of you have been asked to do this on top of your day role, which is a lot of work. So yeah, really pleased to be here. As Ollie mentioned, that the kind of key reasons that we were happy to help get this set up are really to connect people who are facing the same challenges and to identify opportunities where we can work together where there's an overlap. So really looking forward to it. Thanks, Ollie.
No worries. And Maeve?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's so exciting to see so many people on the call today, and amazing, right? There's so many people who've got biodiversity in their job. It obviously shows that it's an emerging issue. I'm now at Schneider Electric. We specialize in energy management, digital automation, and responding to the climate crisis and biodiversity crisis as well. And very much see that we're building the rocket as we're launching it. And so, there's so many different initiatives that it really made sense when Ollie proposed this. We've obviously worked with Ollie on the Scope 3 initiative, and it's gone really well, the Scope 3 peer group. And so feel that there's a real opportunity to replicate that and just challenge that: go fast, go alone, go far. If you want to go far, go together. I think with this, through sharing best practices and worst practices as well, we can go fast, go far, by going together. So I'm really excited about what this is going to bring. And yeah, let's go. Thanks, Ollie.
No worries.
Melissa,
no worries. And
thanks.
over to you, Melissa.
Hello everyone, I'm Melissa Miners. So I'm working on this with Ollie, also very excited about this. I left Unilever last year to spend more time with my little kids before they start school and just have a bit more flexibility. But before that, I was at Unilever for 10 years. So I worked with Maeve, and I can see Ingrid's on the call. I worked on policy and advocacy, and across the 10 years, it was ending deforestation, plastics, climate, but more recently on the nature agenda. And got a bit obsessed by it, and I'm just fascinated and so excited that so many companies are motivated to act now. So great, thanks for joining.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I should also say a big thanks to the advisory board that is helping us. Some people put their hands up at the workshop back in February, but some had already highlighted this. So we should mention Lucy Pickett of Roche, Per Bogstad of Halion, Emma Howcroft of Avantor, Carolina at Anheuser-Busch, Michaela at Burberry, who's just got engaged today. There's a reason why she can't be on the call. So we've got our first wedding already in the peer group, which is great. Yeah, so huge thanks to all of you. And indeed, we may indeed add to that advisory board. So as people go, perhaps the people who click 10 as their maturity, perhaps you need to come onto our advisory board, help us. So before we get started, let's have a look at that poll. That'd be fascinating. And let's end that now and let's share the results. So Melissa, Tom, and Maeve. So here we have. Wow, over 50%, 71% still working on their nature strategy. You've come to the right place, I think. So I hope. Again, we have 17 people, obviously, either doing the SBTN or TNFD, so plenty of people to rely on. And maturity, 110, 19. Who was the 9? I mean, well, you might as well just called yourself 10. I mean, there's no reason to call yourself a 9. That's great. So the thing I haven't said is I know what you've said. I can tell who said what. It's all there. The data's in the background. So that made you think, hasn't it? So that's going to really help us as we move forward. The last question we added on at the end is one of the things that came up in the advisory board meeting as a kind of fresh live question. And then again, there's a debate about whether this falls into scope or not, but I think it may do, is about EUDR. So again, we wanted to pick that up very quickly to say, do you think we should be running a dedicated session on EUDR? Now, that's a loaded question because we could run a dedicated session on everything and that would become an overload. So it feels like there's a lot of people there would definitely be keen on that. So we may follow up with those 23 just to make sure. And it may well be that we point to something else that's already existed. Tom, Melissa, Maeve, any surprises or any thoughts on that?
No surprises. It's kind of what I was expecting. There's kind of a big spread across the group for all of the answers, which is good because it means lots of people can learn from others. Lots of people can see each other's on topics they're strong on. I put yes for we have a strategy, but I think this space is moving so quickly that it almost feels as soon as you've got a strategy down, you need to evolve and adapt it. So I think even if you're kind of further along with this, there's still a need to continue to evaluate best practices, which this group will help to do.
Yeah. Great. Okay. I think we should start our first meeting. So I'll hand over to you, Melissa, because one of the most important things that this group will be doing is making sure we can keep you in a quick-fire way on top of everything else all the other initiatives are doing. No mean feat, but hopefully really useful. So over to you, Melissa.
Yeah, so as Ollie said, this is the kind of the opportunity to hear from other groups, and I realised they're doing so much work. We kind of haven't given them, you know, you could have whole hour sessions on each of their pieces of work. So if you have follow-ups, we're going to try and address those in the chat. And if we don't do that, then I can field some of the questions because I know that these guys are doing so much work. But I won't take up any more time. So the first person is Akanksha Katri from the World Economic Forum, who runs the nature agenda. I first met Akanksha walking around the halls of the Biodiversity COP14 in 2018, where we were trying to work out what was going on. And since then, she's driven the agenda at the World Economic Forum. So over to you, Akanksha, to share what you're doing. Thanks.
Thanks, Melissa and Oliver. I have to say, like, I'm like smiling so much. It's incredible to see 82 people who somehow touch upon nature in their job. It's just so inspiring and encouraging. It's true that Melissa and I often share stories about we were like 3 or 4 people completely lost in the COP14. What do businesses even do when it comes to nature? So we've definitely come a long way. I have a slide for us. I think I have about 10 minutes. So I'm going to kick us off. I also was very delighted to see the lineup of speakers, so all friends, which you will see my presentation will show how interconnected the agenda and the actors are as well. Just repeating quick introduction, Akanksha, I head the biodiversity work at the World Economic Forum. And within that, there are a couple of different work streams, and I'll go through it in my presentation. So again, it won't be news to any one of you. There's a reason why you are here in this call. But we have collectively seen the agenda evolve so fast, way faster than what we saw when it came to climate. So often we draw the parallels between climate and nature, and what happened in climate, say from 2013 onwards, it took easily 15 years, and we are seeing all that timeline just condensed. So starting, of course, from the Global Biodiversity Framework being adopted in Montreal in December 2022, we are seeing a significant push from regulators, policymakers, standard setters to really look at how do we give concrete guidance for businesses to think about nature not just as a conservation thing that happens from the philanthropy, but fundamentally where it touches their supply chains. The third thing, in COP15 in Montreal, for the first time ever, there was a finance delegation at the biodiversity COP. And this is really something that we are seeing move both from the banks as well as the asset manager side, is they want to understand their risk exposure to biodiversity and start pivoting investment also into nature positive businesses. And then last but not the least, but which most of you would know better than me, is really customers and employees increasingly want to work for companies and buy from companies who are doing right by nature and really reducing their impact. Sorry, I think there's a, I think there are 3 pieces that I'm going to speak about. One is really the work we are doing collaboratively with WBCSD and Business for Nature on sector transitions to nature positive. And a lot of it started from It's a Now for Nature campaign with Business for Nature, where in Davos a few years ago, we all came together and aligned on this framework, which is the ACT framework. So assess, commit, transform, and disclose. And to do that, there this is just a way of showcasing how the multiple frameworks, guidances that exist can actually fit into this framework. So it's just about creating this overarching umbrella or a narrative within which you can engage with SBTN, with TNFD, with FRAG, etc. And this is just picking out something from the TNFD piece, which many of you would also be aware of, is the first question for those who like, okay, what do you mean by nature and why does it matter to me? Is really we speak in the same language of TNFD or SBTN, is recognizing nature as the realm. So looking at land, freshwater, marine, and atmosphere, with biodiversity being really the red thread across these pieces. So last year at the UN General Assembly week, the three of our organizations came together to put out 12 sector guidances. So really looking at what does biodiversity and nature mean for if you are in the built environment or you are in chemicals, what are your impacts and dependencies, and what really should be the priority action for your industry, for your company. And each of these reports actually have a similar structure where they look at the overview, they understand what the sector level impacts and dependencies are, and then how do they fit into the mitigation hierarchy in terms of priority actions that need to be taken. Again, this was just like a very global workstream governance to showcase how the three organizations came together. And I really see the same spirit here with this peer group is let's not just create and fragment the space. Let's come together and collaborate so that we are kind of building the song sheet that we are comfortable to sing from. Again, September last year, this was a quick launch of the reports and the website that we have. And in fact, currently, Business for Nature is leading all of us three organizations on a communications campaign. So really coming out with video messages, quote cards, just the website presence. And if you go on the Business for Nature website, you can find an executive summary for all of the sector guidances that are existing as of today. Just a quick thing, we love to see our pictures always. And Eva, as always, a brilliant moderator for the session that we were able to have in New York last year. The second phase, which will focus right now, we, at least from the World Economic Forum, will be going into 4 additional sectors with the China deep dive going through it. So we are prioritizing mining and metals, working very closely with ICMM, automotive, port operations, offshore wind. But in addition, the piece which is really coming up is what is the role of financial services sector in addition to the real economy. So this is going to be a complementary but separate piece of work, and we are engaging quite a few banks and asset managers for this piece of work. And when we did a basic amount of desk research, we understand that when it comes to nature, you can look at investments in value chains and beyond value chains. Or in other words, you can be investing in nature or you can be investing for nature. So really reducing your negative footprint as well. So this is a very quick set of actors when what do we mean by financial services and investors? And I know I'm like running through this in the interest of time. And when we did a lot of the desk research and scoping, what we identified, and this was again quite a few banks who were telling us, is in this space right now, what is missing is a unified or a convergence of assessment framework, not for the banks themselves, but for them to be asking information for corporates, which actually increases the risk in their portfolio. So that was like one big chunk of the work, which was on sector transitions. The second piece of work that is really gaining quite a bit of momentum here, and it's good to see Charlie here on the call in his new role, because in his previous role with McKinsey, he was working with us quite collaboratively on the Biodiversity Credits Initiative. It's definitely on the rise. It's every day there is a new news article which pops up about the biodiversity credits, good, bad, ugly, potential, all of that. Where the starting point for us on biodiversity credits is really the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which recognizes this as an instrument to unlock finance from the market in Target 19. So this is just the very preliminary biodiversity credits landscape, where there are projects currently on the ground, some actually pivoting from carbon into biodiversity, but then there are others which are going into ecosystems which may not be as rich in carbon, but really rich on biodiversity. This is a quick understanding of why would a corporate, and that's exactly the question we've been asking. If you are a company, why would you buy the biodiversity credit? What kind of claims you should be making? So we had released a report that actually Charlie quite a bit worked on, is really understanding the drivers and narrowing it down that yes, reputational is one of them, but a big part of it is going to be regulatory as well. It's a completely new space, lots of outstanding questions. Nobody can claim to have answers. And so we want to bring as many players as possible to be able to answer questions. The couple of work streams underneath is one, really the starting point has to be integrity and high level of governance for this market. And how do we make sure there is equity and inclusion of Indigenous people and local communities in it? This second piece of work is really metrics and measurement. Because the biomes are different, the reality on the ground is different. What are you measuring? What are you reporting on? And how does corporates actually compare from one project versus the other, since biodiversity is so highly localized? And then the third piece is really we pulled together a frontrunners coalition in terms of making a business case for biodiversity credits. So I'm going to pause here. I think I'm at my 10 minutes. Lots of information, and thank you for inviting me.
An initiative of initiatives. That's amazing. You crammed a lot in there. That's brilliant. What a great start. Thank you, Akanksha.
Thanks, Akanksha. That I mean, again, as I said, we could go on and on with that, and I can see questions in the chat. But what we'll do is, if you don't mind answering those in the chat, and we'll just move on, and then I can field any questions if you need to go. And just handing over to Eva Zabi, who runs Business for Nature, and again has grown it immensely over the last, is it 5 years, 6 years? But keen to hear from you. Yeah, okay. Keen to hear from you. So I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Thanks, Ollie. Thanks, GSK and also Schneider Electric for making this whole thing possible. Like Akanksha, we've been in this whole area for so many decades, and suddenly this call has just given me this wow, yes, it's happening. And we all need to take those supporting companies need to have that responsibility to come together and make it as effective and efficient for all of you to actually get on and take the action and feel that comfort and have that peer support. So this group is just simply fantastic. So today, I'm Eva, I lead Business for Nature Coalition. Hopefully some of you have heard of Business for Nature. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we're all about and then focus on two things. One is the It's Now for Nature campaign, which is all about companies having a strategy. So obviously we were very pleased to see that first question. And the second on COP16. So I saw Luke's point in the chat and we can come to that. So Business for Nature is a global coalition. We now have over 90 partner organizations. 3/4 of our partners are business associations at an international as well as national level. You'll see on the call today, I saw, Akanksha obviously from the forum, WBCSD is on the call, World Wildlife Habitat Council's on the call, BSR, I saw Erin, TNFD. So is another one of those, Ollie, you just mentioned Coalition of Coalitions. We are grouping, and we also have in our network over 1,400 companies of different sizes and geographies that contribute and engage to our work. And together our mission is to drive credible business action and policy ambition to achieve a nature positive economy for all by 2030. We have two strategic priorities, which are advocacy and business action. Advocacy is all about what Melissa was putting in the chat about the engaging in the COP processes, but beyond that as well is providing the courage, comfort, and technical expertise to government so that they adopt, implement, and enforce ambitious policies. Business action, on the other side, is around scaling and speeding up business action by strengthening, clarifying, and amplifying why and how companies should act now. So just like Akanksha was talking about the assess, commit, transform, disclose, at some point, when you look at all these different frameworks that are out there, 90% of the content is aligned, but it comes across as every time a new piece of information, a new piece. So how can we simplify and align so that we can drive that action moving forward? And that in the middle is the ambition loop, which means we know companies are already taking action and making commitments, but the voluntary efforts are just unfortunately not cutting it. We're going to need to drive that policy ambition to help transform the economic and financial system. The way we work in Business for Nature, we have a structure where a lot of our work is global, and there's engagement opportunities through our partners in particular. They work much more closely with companies directly, but we have also regional hubs with leads in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. And that will then is designed to learn from and like feed into our global. We really truly want to have a global outreach, which is not about taking a very Western or European centric view and trying to shove that down as if it was the only way forward. There is so much happening around the world that just because there aren't enough chains in the communication get lost. We don't know about them. And hopefully through this regional approach, we can just learn more and find more solutions and share more. So as Business for Nature, we have 3 priorities this year, on which is quite a busy timeline, which is also on this screen. So on this slide. So number 1 is we're just in the process of finalizing an update to our high-level policy recommendations. You may have seen earlier this year a public consultation that we did that closed at the beginning of March. We got lots of input from companies, and that's super important for us because in the advocacy and policy space, you can't know exactly which regulation is going to be coming and what positions are going to be taken. So you need to have the agreement up front of what are our overall recommendations that we can go back to as the foundation and then adapt them as we move forward. We did this in 2020. We're doing it again now because a lot of the recommendations we had made had been included in the Global Biodiversity Framework. And we also want to go one level down into more detail of what is it that we are all calling for as a coalition. So look out for them. They'll be coming out probably in end of May, June time. And I can share that with all of you. There may well be opportunities, and we would really welcome all of you to then help, if you do support them, sharing them and supporting these, because policymakers really not only need to hear from leading companies that engage with them, but also need to see the momentum to give them that courage and comfort to adopt ambitious policy. The second priority this year is really to boost and encourage companies to have a nature strategy. This is not about having a separate standalone strategy. This is about having a strategy for nature. It can be part of your climate, part of your broader corporate strategy. But what is your forward-looking plan of how you're going to contribute to a nature-positive economy by 2030? So that's It's Now for Nature. And this is going to be a baseline moment at COP16, where we're going to say, okay, look, these are a number of strategies that are available on nowfornature.org. And it's a long-term campaign to 2030. So how will that evolve alongside the CBD COP process as well? And then the third is leading and coordinating this business engagement and business voice at COP16. It can be a relatively complicated space, unfamiliar to many companies, but working with our partners and working directly with the CBD Secretariat and others, we're managing to join forces and try and simplify the process as much as possible. It's not at all so far as it's not been so far as complicated as the climate COPs with blue passes and all of these different very complicated pieces. However, given what we managed to do together in COP15 and get so much momentum, it may be that the CBD Secretariat changed the registration process. We just do not know yet. And Cali in Colombia, which is where the conference is going to take place, is very small. The conference venue is very small. So we understand there might even be 2 different venues to be confirmed. But for Business for Nature, our focus, and Luke, Luke put in the chat, 100% our focus is on COP16. At COP15, there were over 1,000 business and finance representatives who showed up and spoke up. We had our messages, we engaged, we were super ambitious, there was consistency and real constructive engagement in the conversations. If at COP16, which is seen as the implementation COP, businesses pull back and do not come, it will also send a relatively negative message, which is businesses showed up to influence a government agreement, and that was very exciting. But when it comes to doing the work, they're not here. And the CBD have always shown the Global Biodiversity Framework as a framework for all. And so that means that business and finance have actually a disproportionately important role to play in the success of achieving the target. So we can talk more about that, but it's a busy year, and it doesn't mean that we all have to go to everything. We can be smart in our whole network and divide and conquer. So just, I already went on to some of the COP16 stuff, so I don't know how much more I'll be able to share, but I wanted to share, so on nature, we know that action on nature lags behind. I think this figure, the third bullet down here, which is from the World Benchmarking Alliance, of less than 1% of companies actually know how much their operations depend on nature, is a bit of an alarm bell in terms of you may know some, but you haven't really, most companies haven't really fully understood or appreciated how the trends in nature decline fundamentally impact their business. So this is, you see how aligned we are, because Akanksha had a slide, this is not a joke, which is basically the same as this. So there we go. So the It's Now for Nature campaign is an unbranded joint global collective effort to 2030 to drive business action. And it's all centered around companies having a strategy, as I mentioned. There's a handbook, a nature strategy handbook available in multiple languages, which follows through the assess, commit, transform, disclose, and asks you questions that you should be asking yourself as you're developing your strategy. We know of groups of companies that have come together and done a cut and paste of those questions and just working through bit by bit, what are these questions, what should we be asking? And there are specific references, not, oh, look at SBTN, but look at SBTN, step 1A, this page, whatever, to have a look to how you would answer this question as you develop your strategy. In order, so it's a long-term strategy to 2030. I mentioned that we need to give some consistency and some comfort and certainty to companies that we're not going to change what we're asking to do every 2 seconds, and that they're actually, if you have a strategy, it puts the power back in your court to then learn how to navigate all these regulatory and reporting requirements that are coming at you. So instead of being reactive, how can the company understand what its position is, and that will help then navigate through this dynamic and understandably challenging requirements that are coming. For now, for a strategy to be to be visible on the Now for Nature website, there are 4 minimum requirements. One is the strategy has to have included a materiality assessment. 2 is there needs to be targets that are smart, that are aligned with those impacts, dependencies, risks, and opportunities that have been identified through the materiality assessment. And there need to be actions, and it needs to have been signed off by the C-suite or the board. So we need some level of accountability there. We hope you all will submit your strategies. We are very encouraged by that first poll. Very quickly, can you hear me okay, by the way? Is my voice going up and down?
Yeah,
okay.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, suddenly I get this sort of weird echo in my head. COP16. So what new stuff can I say that I didn't say before as I was going through? Yes, the theme of the conference is peace with nature. It's really going to be the People's COP in Latin America. It's seen as one of the important milestones to COP30 in Brazil on the climate side. So there is a very joined up Latin America focus for those of you who operate a lot there. But it's going to be the People's COP, and that means that we need to think carefully of how business and finance show up in Colombia. And I prefer to share that I think we should be quite humble in how we show up, as listening mode, as what are we going to contribute to this, that we are part of the problem, we need to be part of the solution, understanding different perspectives. This is maybe not the time to do all the fancy bells and whistles, which we can do at New York Climate Week instead. before, which might be more appropriate. So I'm just flagging it in an open setting as this peer group, because it might just be something for you to think about. We will obviously be wanting to share success stories and what companies have been doing, but on the ground, we expect there to be a real effort of that dialogue and finding solutions together. But it will be cool because COP16 is supposed to be where the governments come with their updated NBSAPs, their National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, and we're coming with, hey, look, here are the business and finance strategies that exist for nature. Probably one of the messages will be, well, clearly not enough on both sides, but there's also a message of it's possible. So how do we then take that? It exists, it's possible to do this and scale up. As Business for Nature, we are organizing with our partners a program, and the Bloom event, the Green Biz Bloom, is going to be taking place 24th, 25th. We've been writing to and with our partners, on behalf of our partners, engaging with the Colombian presidency of the COP16 to see how much we can make sure that there's a compelling business program, because so many of the partners will be there, and there will be opportunities then to engage with policymakers and each other and all of these partners. So we're putting together a web page. We'll share this with this group. So maybe we'll share it with you, Melissa, and then you can share it with everyone. With what we know when. Right now, we don't unfortunately know enough and that much, but we will be organizing a webinar in due course when we have more. So there we go. So here are some actions that you can take right now. I already mentioned the strategies. Akanksha already mentioned the sector-specific ones. One question we haven't spoken about, but please do keep it in mind, because this is also a trend that's going up, is what are your advocacy efforts, and are they aligned with what you're actually calling for? And this responsible policy engagement is really important in terms of which associations you're part of. If you haven't yet, sign our Nature is Everyone's Business call to action. This is a super low bar, and it just means that you're part of the momentum. And then if you're interested in some of the regional and national work, then please do let us know. So hopefully that was helpful. I should have mentioned at the beginning that my colleague Michael of Oswene Weiss is who's our business action senior manager, who's on the line too, is also available to answer any questions and to pick up with any of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And it sounds like we're going to need you on future calls to give updates on all of everything you were speaking about. And thanks for those call to actions, which we'll share with the group after. And over to you, Charlie, to give us an update from TNFD. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Melissa. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, yeah, we can.
Excellent. Well, I just wanted to start by absolutely echoing Akanksha and Eva's messages that this group is fantastic to see come together. There's so many people that have been thrown into different positions and taking new responsibilities in nature and biodiversity, but really can kind of learn from a lot of what's been going on and kind of come together to try and solve those issues. So it's really lovely to see. So I sit in between two teams. So I work very closely and work with the TNFD team and also the Green Finance Institute in the UK. And essentially across those two teams, I head up market engagement for the TNFD. And so working very closely with the UK companies, helping them build the business case for action on nature, but also understanding the how. So once you've kind of figured out the why and you think you've got a strong case, what does that first starting step actually look like? I wasn't going to share slides, but you know what? We've had so many wonderful things and so many wonderful presentations so far that I thought that I will just put a few things together. So let me just grab these up. Okay, here we go. Can you see the screen okay?
We're about to, I think. There we go. Just need to go on presenter mode. Yeah, there you go.
Excellent. So first of all, I wanted to start by thinking about kind of really what is TNFD. So I'm going to give you a whistle stop tour, 5 to 10 minutes. We're going to be covering the why of TNFD, the what in terms of where we got to, and then also a little bit about what's next over the next year. And really, TNFD at its heart is about improving transparency in the market. So it's understanding risks and opportunities posed by nature, as we've come to do over the last 5 years for climate. And it's also making sure that they're clear not only for businesses, but also for the investor community. So why is this important? It's important because nature risk is financial risk. Nature opportunities are financial opportunities. These are real implications that are occurring even today for businesses all around the world. And it's very easy to think about this in terms of kind of conceptual terms, or are we looking into the future when things are going to become a lot more kind of pernicious and concerning than they are today? But actually, these are things that are really relevant to all of the businesses in the room. And so I wanted to draw everyone's attention at the beginning just to a really fantastic series of case studies that Bloomberg New Energy Finance published last year with TNFD, that are real life examples of how nature-related risks have had tangible financial impacts on businesses. So they take examples from all across the world, 10 businesses that in some way have faced nature-related risks, spanning both transition risks, so these are risks that are born from our impacts on nature, as also as well as physical risks, so born by the way in which we might depend on nature for different services it provides. And so across those 10 examples, the total financial loss across all of those companies exceeds $80 billion US. And I think what's really powerful about this is, again, these are not conceptual, they're not theoretical. They're examples that have actually happened to businesses in the past. And it provides a really strong evidence base for anyone around the room who's trying to make the case to other people within your organization that this is an issue that we need to prioritize and think about. So what is the TNFD doing about this and has done? So in September, we released our core disclosure recommendations. And so essentially TNFD is a set of disclosure recommendations and guidance that's aimed at enabling businesses to assess, report and act on those nature-related risks and opportunities that we were just mentioning. So across the final recommendations, there's 11 that look and feel very similar to TCFD. And so these are similar and kind of constructed in a similar way, very much by design. And that's both to make sure that they're familiar, but also when you come to implementation, if businesses do decide to think about taking on TNFD and using that as a tool within their broader approach to nature, so thinking about a kind of broader strategic approach like Eva was mentioning, then there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of data, a lot of skills throughout the teams that you might already have on climate that you can leverage to help on the nature side as well. So very much created with a similar framework, similar language, very deliberately to ensure that interoperability and that synergies between the two. There's also 3 additional disclosures specific to TNFD on top of TCFD, which focus on 3 particular issues that came up a lot within the market engagement whilst the recommendations were being developed. So these are the ones that you can see highlighted, and they focus on engagement with IPLCs, so Indigenous people and local communities, interface with priority locations. So this is a real focus on understanding where different assets are located or where different, for example, products are being sourced from. And then also a focus on value chains. So recognizing right from the outset that a lot of the most material risks and opportunities within nature can happen up at the value chain. So it's important that a lot of this focus and this scope starts with a full value chain approach. So what was actually released and what are the resources that you have available to you to help you kind of work your way through this journey and understand what makes sense for you? There are, of course, the recommendations, so the disclosures that I've just mentioned, but there's a whole suite of resources and guidance that sits underneath that that's really aimed at breaking this journey down and answering specific questions that businesses have. So there's a whole package that's around getting started with TNFD. So really takes companies through the basics of what this could mean for them. How do I communicate this internally? What could my first steps be? It can feel sometimes that there's so much going on in this space and so many different things happening that it's difficult to know where to start. And this is exactly aimed at trying to help navigate that path. Then there's a series of tools that sit underneath that that tackle and answer different questions. So there's the LEAP approach, which is the TNFD's approach to undertaking a risk and opportunity assessment. So what are the different stages that you should follow and the different resources that you can draw from, the different types of data that you might use and the questions you might ask yourself. There's specific sector guidance that helps elucidate some of the most important impacts for each sector and dependencies, as well as what some of the metrics that you could consider are. And then actually more recently than this, we've had our first set of capacity building materials have been released as well. So this is called TNFD in a Box, which is aimed a little bit more at providing training, both for everyone around the room, so people that have nature and biodiversity within their remit, but then also wider teams within your organization that you might need to communicate this to or work with to kind of move towards action. So after the recommendations were released in September, we had the first announcement of early adopters at Davos in January. And so there was a total of around 322 different organizations that all announced to either adopt TNFD and report in 2024 or 2025. And across that, there's a really interesting mix, and it covers a lot of different space. So there's around about a third finance, around about 2/3 corporates. And within those corporates, it's covering a really wide range of sectors, from fast-moving consumer goods to utilities, to mining, to lots of different things. It stretches across 46 countries and 5 different continents, and an interesting mix of both larger companies as well as some smaller companies as well. And so since January as well, we've continued to kind of engage in the market and support companies that are interested in learning more about this. And there have been many more companies that have signed up and adopted TNFD as well since then. So where is TNFD now and where's it going? So the priorities for 2024 and what we'll be focusing on is continue to expand the sector guidance and finalizing the metrics that are suggested for different companies. So there's 9 sector guidances at the moment that have just finished consultation, and final versions of those guidances and the metrics they're linked to will be released in June. And alongside that, there'll be an additional 7 sector guidances that come out for consultation as well there. So I really encourage people to go and have a look at these and have a quick read through, because I think when you see the kind of narrative that's really relevant for your sector and the types of metrics that this can look like, that's when these things really come to life. There's some elements of additional guidance that the team are working on this year as well. So for example, transition planning, how do you think about that alongside climate? So what do we kind of do about this? Very linked to the strategy work that Eva was talking about as well, and the transition pathways that Akanksha was talking about in the first session too. There's a renewed focus on engagement and capacity building within the market. So you'll see lots of things happening here, lots of support for companies that are interested in learning more, both, again, as I mentioned at the front, on the how, which is, what does these first steps look like? Where do we source the right data? How do we go about the analysis? But also the why, because I think that's still really important to keep a focus on. So why does it make sense to get started on nature and take action on nature? What's the really clear business case for my sector and my company? And then the final thing that I'll mention is this on data. So there's the blueprint that's being developed this year for a global nature public data facility. What does this mean? You can think of it essentially as almost like a clearinghouse for all of the different types of nature-related data that might be useful for TNFD disclosure and informing wider action on nature. And the idea is a lot of amazing and peer-reviewed data is out there, but it can also be quite difficult to access. So can we provide an infrastructure that makes that much, much more accessible in a format that's really easy to pick up for companies to use? And then one final note, just with my GFI hat on rather than my TNFD hat on, is there's an interesting report that I think many people will find useful in building that evidence case that's coming out next week. And it's from the universities of Oxford, Reading, and some research institutes that work very closely with central banks around the world. And it's essentially quantifying the impact of nature-related risks on UK GDP. Looks at a lot of different scenarios: droughts, wildfire, global breadbasket failures, as well as antimicrobial resistance. That I think a lot of the people around the room will find it interesting, because I can't tell you what the final results are, but what I can tell you is that the results on GDP are somewhat eye-watering. So look out for that one if you're in the process of trying to collect evidence that's going to be useful for making this case. And I'll leave you there.
Thank you, Charlie. That was great. I mean, again, very useful information. The data issue keeps coming up, so I think we'd all like an update on the data facility once that matures. And I can see you've got a couple of questions in the chat already. Thank you so much. I'm moving on to Anna Willingshofer from the Wildlife Habitat Council. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Let me put up my my slides so I can share them with everyone. Let me know if you see them.
Yes, we can see them. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Anna Willingshofer, and I'm the Chief Science and Innovation Officer with WHC, the Wildlife Habitat Council. And I'm here to present and talk about a specific initiative that we have been working since 2023, that is the Nature Steward Alliance. So before moving to present and talk a little bit about that alliance, for those who don't know WHC, we are a US-based NGO. We have been working for more than 35 years in an intersection of business and nature, and we work with over 100 companies globally on supporting in their nature positive journey. So what is the Nature Steward Alliance? So this has been an idea that came to life and was developed by leading life science and healthcare companies, including Avantor, Corning, Cetuvia, GSK, and MilliporeSigma. And what was the idea of this alliance? The alliance was to have a collaborative effort to advance nature and biodiversity awareness and education, empower nature conservation actions, and also prepare companies and their value chain for nature-based global frameworks that are coming. And we all know, we all heard from previous presentations what all these frameworks are. So it was to focus on an alliance that can bring in a platform for companies to engage their staff and their suppliers on nature. And what was the purpose of this? It was really to guide and support suppliers in developing and implementing robust conservation efforts, to have an actionable project toolkit that can actually implement scalable biodiversity-based initiatives, that could also establish an interactive program for tracking progress, for sharing information and measuring success related to nature initiatives, and also to frame and position the effort to engage suppliers and promote biodiversity action across the supply chain. So the benefits are several to have that alliance and to have those toolkits in place for the companies and their suppliers, because it would reduce the burden on procurement teams to train their suppliers on nature and biodiversity requirements, provide staff and suppliers with a bite-sized method to engage with complicated global frameworks and legislation, develop of a community of practice in the value chain, etc., and also measure, and this is very, very important for this alliance, is to see how the progress could be measured, how the suppliers can be trained, how to see how many sites have been contributing to nature-based solutions, and also to see how all the efforts can have an uplift across the entire value chain. So where we are now, as mentioned, this alliance came to life in 2023, and WHC has been supporting those companies that I mentioned before in coming together and bringing this alliance to life. We have developed a site-based biodiversity toolkit. What is this toolkit? Is a guidance to plan, implement, monitor, and maintain conservation programs surrounding conservation initiatives and companies and suppliers. And some of the companies have already kicked off some pilots using that toolkit. So where are we heading right now, and why does it make sense for me to present this Nature Steward Alliance today? is that we think it would be important to grow or incorporate the alliance in an existing initiative and bring others on board, and to see how the toolkit that has been developed can be digitized so it is accessible for everyone in a very easy manner, user-friendly way for the companies and their suppliers. To develop training videos on the toolkit and on how companies can get started, how can they monitor, how they can do their site-based conservation efforts. Also to start a pilot or several pilots on how the toolkit is being used. And obviously all of that will need an operational alignment. So the companies that are part of the alliance and are using the toolkit are all aligned on the progress and on the vision of the alliance. So how could this digitization look like? And this has been already spinned off a little bit in terms of what would it entail. So this is just a sample of a website that could actually bring together the information that is needed. So this is just a quick overview of how this could look like, but it would be something that could bring in for companies that want to get started to see very easily where to find the information and where to report on their progress. Also for sites that need information, they could easily come into their website and see that information very easily. Also, the community involved would be having access to training materials, to educational programs and other activities that are being set by the companies and by the alliance. And also to have kind of a quick start guide. And this would be a platform bringing the different resources together as we're seeing it here today at the Nature Peer Group. It would be to present in a very user-friendly way everything that is going on and has been trained in terms of training, in terms of best practices, in terms of data, et cetera, et cetera. So this is just us very, very shortly presenting to you today what the Nature Steward Alliance is and where we're looking to go from now. So I will stop here. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Anna. That was great. Again, let's field questions in the chat. I think we're slightly short on time, so moving on to Thomas's sharing from GSK. Thomas, are you good to go?
I am good to go. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, let's see if this video works.
I was going to say, here comes the biggest challenge of my
we
day.
take a poll on whether we think this video is going to work or not. Let's just decide whether it be first.
I know what I would do if I was a betting man. I'd have not going to it. That's right.
And just to say about that last section, so thank you to everyone that participated. Now, moving forward, everyone's going to take 5 minutes in the future, and it's going to be much more quick. It's going to be about updates and actions. So we wanted everyone to get a bit of an introduction to obviously the various different initiatives, but it's going to be even faster paced, and we're going to force them to talk about actions. So yeah, it's a challenge to them, but also a thanks to them as well. So over to you, Tom.
Brilliant. Thank you. Message received. So can you see my screen? I guess is a good first question. Wonderful. So yeah, I'm going to spend a bit of time talking to you about a water stewardship project that we're really proud of. The reason I wanted to talk about this today is next we are going to start going through the mapping exercise that we'd like to do with this group. And I think this project is a really nice example of the value of identifying companies that have a shared problem and the other stakeholders that need to be engaged, and then actually coming together and doing something about it. So this will hopefully give you a bit of insight into why we want to do that exercise. Just starting with setting the scene a little bit, and it's almost like we've planned it because you will have seen this pretty much exact framework a couple of times in the slides before. this is a very simple view of GSK's approach to nature. So our overarching ambition is that we want to contribute to a nature positive world in line with the goals from the GBF to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030. And we very much take the approach that is outlined through the SBTN in terms of looking at our impact and our dependencies on nature across 4 focus areas, so freshwater, land, oceans, atmosphere, with biodiversity clearly running across those 4. In terms of what we actually do, how we go out and deliver, we've kind of got these 3 action points. We start by looking at how we can avoid and reduce our own impacts. So that's operations, value chain, use and disposal of products. For residual impacts, we look at how we can invest in protecting and restoring nature. And then we also look at how we can accelerate collective action on nature. And that is exactly what this group is all about. Kind of zooming in on water a little bit, and maybe starting on why does water matter to GSK? I guess it's quite an obvious one. It's quite an easy sell into the business. So we are a healthcare company. Our mission is to get ahead of disease together. And clearly, water is absolutely fundamental to that, both directly and for the production of the vaccines and the medicines which we produce. Behind vaccinations, access to water, health and sanitation is the second biggest health intervention that is out there. So clearly, as part of our strategy to get ahead of disease together, we need to have active programs at looking at how we can improve that standard. In terms of kind of looking at our impacts, I guess, so not surprisingly, the majority of our water footprint actually sits in the supply chain. So as we look at the strategy and the programs, a lot of the focus is on how we can not just look at our own sites, but also how can we collaborate with suppliers and further actors deeper in the supply chain. And we've got 3 targets which really demonstrate that. So the first target being ops focus, looking across our own sites, how can we get all of our sites to be achieving good water stewardship, which for us is aligning with the Alliance for Water Stewardship Standard, and how can we reduce the amount of water that we're using? And we've actually gone past that 20% already, so we need to extend the ambition there. We're also looking for water neutrality, both across our own sites, but also key suppliers who are based in water-stressed regions. As I get a bit more into the project here, we'll demonstrate how we're actually doing that. And then finally, a kind of problem which is more specific to the industry, but looking to have zero impact PI and AMR in the areas that we operate, both for sites and suppliers. So really key strategic imperative, looking through the whole value chain with a focus on the supply chain. Now kind of zooming into the project which I wanted to talk about today. So we have a manufacturing facility in Nashik, and we also have a number of our key suppliers who operate in and around the Godavari Basin as well. So this is really an example of us taking that framework I showed on the first slide and then actually applying it in practice, showing what this looks like. So bullet point number 1, action number 1 is all about how we can avoid and reduce the actual footprint of our manufacturing site. And it's kind of all the usual best practice projects you see across the manufacturing facility, looking at how we can reuse water, capture rainwater, metering, all that good stuff. We're then looking at, for the water which we need to use for our operations that we've not been able to reduce, how can we replenish, how can we restore that water footprint into the local basin, into the local communities. So we're doing some work with a local not-for-profit called WOTR on how we can restore ecosystems, train, help with agricultural practices to account for that residual footprint from the site. And then probably the most exciting bit for me is then looking at how we can take a leadership position in that collective action so that we can transform at the water basin level, not just for our own specific site. And there's a couple of projects I'm going to go into more detail on around how we're doing that. Now comes the moment of truth. I'm not normally a fan of videos on Zoom calls, but this is a brilliant video, which is the people who are actually doing this work on the ground and the impact it's having on them, telling the story. So I'm going to cross my fingers, press play, and hope you can hear some audio, but do shout if you cannot.
माझ्या गावाच्या चारी बाजूनी धरणं आहेत. एक बाजूनी मुकण्याचा डॅम आहे, त्याच्या पुढं वैतरणा डॅम आहे. या साईड गोटी साईडला दार नाही. थोडंसं पुढं गेलं तर कोरबगावचं धरण आहे. पण आम्हाला प्यायला पाणी मिळत नाही.
Since my childhood, we have been always taught about the significance of water. It's not only used for cleansing ourselves physically, but it is to cleanse our soul and spirits. We worship water as a goddess. I'm Kanhaiya Mehrotra. I live in this beautiful city, Nashik, which is at the western part of India. Nashik is also the origin for river Godavari. It is significant from a religious and spiritual point of view, but for Nashik, it is also important for the livelihood for a lot of villages which depends for agriculture and farming. Water is also the key ingredient in making medicines and vaccines, which are important to human health. Unfortunately, in the recent years, the climate changes is having a huge impact on the people's livelihood and their health, with water scarcity or unpredictable rainfalls, and that means flooding is happening. Sometimes there is no rain, drought is happening.
जेव्हा मी आले तेव्हा चांगलं वाटायचं. असं एवढं म्हणजे आता जे मी एवढ्या 10 वर्षामध्ये बघते ना, ते मागच्या 20 वर्षामध्ये नव्हते बघत. म्हणजे शरीरासाठी ते इकडचं तिकडचं म्हणजे शूट नाही होत. पण त्याच्यामध्ये थंडी, ताप, बहुतेक काहीतरी आजार चालूच राहतात. हा, पाणी नाही राहिलं तर मग राहिलं सगळं. मग आणि पाण्याची सोय जर नसली तर आम्ही कुठलंही काही शेत म्हणजे करू शकत नाही. मग रोजगारासाठी बाहेर जातात.
We as humans have to respect and appreciate the usage of water as it is scarce and limited. I'm very proud of GSK's commitment to address climate change and the nature loss. That commitment includes having positive impact on the water-stressed areas where our company operates in Algeria, Pakistan, and here in India by 2030. We are part of this community here, so it is important that we connect the dots. That is why we are partnering with Watershed Organization Trust on projects to improve access to water.
In the last 30 years that I've been working in the area of water resources development, watershed development, I've seen marked changes in the way weather has been expressing itself and climate also. Climate change also impacts health. For instance, in this village, in a period of drought, you have to get water from outside the village, and that often is contaminated. That has serious health issues. In the rainy season, water actually washes fecal matter into the wells, which is the only source of drinking water for people. And that in turn causes infection and waterborne diseases. In partnership with GSK, in both Biturli as well as another 4 villages in the neighborhood, we are having the community to harvest rainwater in this entire area they live in. That means we are doing trenching, masonry structures, as well as check dams along the river courses, bunds along the fields, and help dig wells so they get access to groundwater.
It is not only about the work we are doing with Watershed Organization Trust, having a positive impact into the community, but about water reduction and conservation at the Nashik site too. Important thing is that we ensure that the usage of water that we do in our medicine process is optimized and reduced, and whatever therefore is used is recycled back after purification. We have also created the 6.5 million liters capacity reservoir where we collect and harvest the water which we get during the rains, and that then gets used within the factory. Over the last 3 years, we have managed to reduce the water consumption at site by 30%. I think all pharmaceutical companies, including GSK, has huge responsibility in terms of the impact our activities have on the environment and health outcomes. It makes me feel that the work that we're doing at GSK plant and with the wider community in the villages is very important for the future generation.
माध्यमातून जर आमची पाण्याची सोय जर झाली, पाणी जर आलंच तर आमच्या जीवनात भरपूर बदल होतील आणि म्हणजे बाहेर उघड्यावर जर गेलो ना तर आमच्या आरोग्यामध्ये थोडा बदल जाणवेल. पाणी तर पाहिजे, पाणी हे जीवन आहे.
Successful.
Fabulous. I was going to say, I'm hoping since I didn't hear anyone shouting, that played, which is good. Which is good. No, I've watched that video about 100 times, and I still find it super inspiring to watch now, just seeing the impact this has on people, right? We do a lot of talking about frameworks and impacts and metrics and all that good stuff, but at the end of the day, it's people that it's impacting, so super inspiring. Just going into a bit more detail on a couple of the points. So yeah, working with a local not-for-profit on the ground, WOTR, looking at how we can restore and replenish the footprint from Nashik that we are not able to reduce and avoid. So working in 4 different villages, looking at a combination of different approaches, both infrastructure, so community wells, dams, etc. And then also looking at training local farmers on agricultural practices, looking at how water can be used more sustainably there. And then general training within the community on the benefits of sustainable water management. So super inspirational project. Got to run for the next 3 years, and then obviously the benefits of the replenishment will continue beyond that. And then looking at I guess the final piece of our strategy, which is the collective action piece, and really, really inspiring that GSK and Lisa Martin, who is our Chief Procurement Officer, have put ourselves forward as the basin champion for the Godavari in India. We have Diageo as our co-champion. So if anyone from Diageo is on the call, massive thank you for all the work and leadership you've done already helping us with this role. And really the intent here is to have a company, a group of people who are willing to step up and lead and facilitate the conversation with all of the relevant stakeholders in that basin in terms of how we can build water resilience between now and 2030. So this is through the Water Resilience Coalition, which if you haven't come across, I'd recommend definitely go and have a look. They've identified 100 priority basins globally where they're looking for champions and they're looking for joint action. In terms of what we're doing so far in our role as Basin Champion, we have an absolutely brilliant partnership with WaterAid, with Cargill and with GAP, which is really focused on improving access to water, sanitation and hygiene through women-led community intervention. So to focus on women and water essentially as we go through the project. We're also on the 7th of May hosting a supplier and partner water forum with a real focus on rejuvenating the Godavari Basin. So it's going to be a collection of some of GSK's key suppliers, some not-for-profits and NGOs in the local area, some representation from the local community, and other corporates like Diageo and others who also have a footprint in the basin and therefore can be part of the solution. And really the intent is to get everybody aligned on what is the ambition of what we're looking to achieve here and start to set out a roadmap for how we're going to work together in order to achieve what we need to in terms of resilience within the basin by 2030. So really, really cool. And one of my asks, this is my final slide, one of my asks is if anybody is interested in either joining that event specifically, if you're looking at this and thinking, we also have a footprint in that basin and want to be part of this, please let me know. And then also a call to action for the other corporates on this group to go and check out the program and see if there's other priority basins which you could potentially step into. Another key takeaway, and I guess a learning from us from going through this project in Nashik and in the Godavari, is that you do really need that joint action if we're going to start to solve some of these problems. And part of what we want this group to do, and particularly the mapping exercise we're going to talk about in a second, is help to make those connections between different companies and organizations in this group so we can understand where are the overlaps from a commodity, from a location, and from an impact area perspective, where we can take joint action and learn from each other where people are maybe further along on certain topics than others. And then the last one that I guess takeaway that I haven't mentioned in terms of how we started to get all of this off the ground was really clearly linking what nature means to GSK, which for us is obviously super strong. If our mission is to get ahead of disease together, there's lots of impacts, there's lots of dependencies, which mean we can't achieve that mission unless we're tackling some of these challenges. So I guess my recommendation, if you haven't already, is to really think about what your strong connection to nature is as a company with your mission, and use that to guide your strategy and your decision-making framework as you go through. And that was everything from me.
Excellent, Tom. Superb. Thank you so much. Normally, as I said, and we will have questions for Tom now, so P has a little think about your questions. You can put your hand up or you can put some in chat, but it'd be great to hear your voice. So ideally, chime up. Before we go to that, and to give people a little chance to think about some questions and to actually accelerate time, I'm just going to introduce this next section. Okay, so I'm just going to do a little bit of that while you guys pluck up the courage to ask Tom a question. So before we do that, I wanted to highlight we're getting right into straight away how we might actually collaborate together. Now, a few of you have seen this. In fact, a couple of you have completed it already, and a few of you will see the link to this in the chat. So we can track initiatives every couple of months and get the lowdown. We can hear practical ideas about what people are doing. But wouldn't it be even better if we could really help match together very, very quickly around geographies, commodities, efforts, challenges, maturity, and immediately just immerse yourself in much smaller groups to really understand what you could be actually working on. Now, in order to do that, we need a survey. Everybody hates surveys, especially your suppliers, when you send them lots of them. But in learning that lesson, hopefully we've put together something here that can be used. This will be a continually running survey. This will continually map the group. So this is shared with everyone. I'm obviously going to be asking who you are. I'm obviously going to be wanting to know about your maturity. If you've already completed some of the questions in here, you can skip this if you want to in the survey, although it's useful if you put it all in one place. I would try and aim for the same score if you can remember it for your maturity. And we're asking you what sort of commodities. Now, we're asking you for 3 commodities. There's some resources here to help you if you're really early and just starting out. Don't worry about getting it precise. This data is not going to be shared with anyone but this group. And even when it will be shared and kept anonymous. So let us know what your priority commodities are. Then we want to look at land, biodiversity in both your operations and your supply chains. If you want to answer both or either, what do you think some of the regions are that are a priority? Okay, now, instead of giving a huge list of geographies and regions, we're asking you to put free text in. I will use ChatGPT to be able to map and put this all together. So, and again, all that data will be kept secure, but don't worry too much about going for a huge list. Just put very clearly where you think those activities are. Same for biodiversity. Same for water. And that is it done. Okay, now in every section, we're going to want to ask from you, particularly those who are the 10s and the 9s and the strategy in places and all that sort of stuff, which, isn't a huge amount of you. If you've done something great, we do want to know what sort of programs are like the Godavari Basin work that GSK are doing, that you're doing, because we will ultimately be matching everybody up on that. So I wanted to cover that very specifically. So that is it's important, those questions. Don't worry about what you can fill out. You can save it and come back to it. It's all of that sort of exercise. So don't worry. But the more of you complete it for our next meeting, we can have some great sessions. So questions for Tom. Who's got questions for Tom? Has anybody got a question for Tom?
I have a quick question. It's Emma. Tom,
sure.
I should probably know this, but I've forgotten. Can you give some insight, if you're able to share it, how you calculated your water volume in the supply chain? Was it just direct questioning, or did you use some assumptions?
Yeah, good question. So that the numbers which were shared on screen are mostly through modeling rather than actual data from suppliers at this stage. So in the similar way you do a kind of desktop-based Scope 3 footprint, we've done something similar looking at supply chain ops product use. The intention is obviously to look at how we can update and make that through accurate by collecting actual data from suppliers. But at the moment, it's a, assumptions desktop model.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Who's next? I love these uncomfortable silences. I'm an expert at them.
Can I
I'm
ask a
an
question?
absolute expert. Yeah, of course you can. You don't need to ask. If you can ask a question, just ask it. Don't worry. Go for
Right,
it.
okay, hi. I'm just trying to put my camera on. I'm Owen from Volvo Cars. My question is about corporate quantification. We've launched, we're using species year to quantify our corporate footprint across the value chain. How are you doing it? Because we don't see any harmonization about approaches. Do you have a plan to do species year or something different?
Is that corporate footprint for what? Sorry, Owen.
Biodiversity.
Okay. I guess the answer is we're still evaluating that at this stage. We haven't picked a tool or a methodology for that yet.
Okay. Does anybody else got any experience of that? If you have, maybe put it in the chat, and Owen, you can pick it up there. Yeah, please do. Noted, Owen. We'll pick it up. Anybody else? Okay. Good, because that brings us right slap bang up to time. Okay, so now it's a chance for you guys to meet each other. Okay, this is an opportunity for you to have some chats with each other. You're going to meet some new friends. You're going to meet some old friends.